Right. Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Advisory Committee's meeting of the 17th of February. I'm Steve Tanner. I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. We want to make our meetings available to as many people as possible, regardless of whether they are using a hybrid setup or in person here at the Town Hall Chamber and online via Zoom. For those in the room, a little housekeeping. Emergency exit is to the rear corner of the room and the assembly point is in the car park. Toilets can be accessed at the end of the corridor on the right-hand side, and there is an accessible toilet to the right of the lift. For panelists on Zoom, please use electronic raise hand by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of your screen. For those in the room, please raise your hand. For attendees on Zoom, please post questions to be enabled. Attendees' names will become visible on the questions board for the record as your question is answered. For those attendees in the room, again, please raise your hand. Tonight, Jane will clerk, and Laura. We've got Laura here tonight. So Laura's going to manage the questions board and participant settings. The meeting will be recorded for minuting purposes, and we will also live stream to our YouTube channel. So item number 2 on the agenda, questions, comments and information from the public and or councillors. I can't see that, by the way.
There's nobody, good. Nothing.
Excellent. Item number 3, agree apologies for absence received. We've got apologies from Sheila Gore. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Great.
Are we happy to accept?
Oh, we have to vote on that.
Yeah.
Oh, so are we happy to accept the apology from? Thank you, Rich. And all those in favour, thank you. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done, Sheila. Apology accepted. Item number 4, declarations of any members' interests. Yeah, it's no.
Sorry, yeah, I should declare
780.
780 Selwood Road.
Great, thank you very much. Item number 5, to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January 2020. Just everyone's had a look and a read. So if I could get someone to propose those, please. Thank you, Mark. Seconded by John. All those in favour?
That's unanimous. Thank you
very much. Item number 6, to consider major planning applications received. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you. So the first application to discuss is number 780 on our list, and it's 25 Selwood Road, Frome. This is for the erection of an extension to the rear elevation and internal reconfiguration. And as Paul has declared an interest, as he is the architect for the application, as he's here, I thought it would be useful for him to talk us through the plans, but just to confirm that he will not take part in the discussion or be able to vote on the proposals. Just bear with me while I share my screen. Okay, so over to you, Paul.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, where do we start? I mean, this property was back in the 1980s was derelict and was part of Trinity, which was I think due to be demolished. So it was in a very bad state of repair. But since then, it was renovated. I think in the late 80s, 90s, and 2 properties were made into one. It's now owned by a family with can't remember, 2 or 3 children. Can't remember now. And they've lived there for, I believe, something like 10 years. And the brief for me was to expand the kind of family space in the kitchen. So currently there's the kitchen, you can just about see in that photograph. Yeah, you can see there on the left-hand side, the existing kitchen is a very small, cramped lean-to, not very well insulated, cold space. However, as you can see, there is a dining room, but the family very rarely use that dining room because it's actually quite a dark space and not that conducive. So they tend to cram around a small table in the kitchen to have their meals. because it's a nicer space and they can look out to the garden, etc. So what they wanted was to have more space for their, open it up into a kind of kitchen, dining area, living space with views out to the garden, more light, better insulated, etc., etc. Like many of these kind of type extensions. And so what we've come up with is something which is kind of distinctly of the 21st century. So we're not trying to mimic the existing, I think it was 18th century, the original building, if I remember rightly. We want to come up with something very distinctive. And interestingly, Adam, who's the applicant on this, he was very clear that he wanted people to be able to read how the building has evolved over the years. Because my original idea was actually to effectively demolish the existing lean-to and put a flat roof extension, replace that with a flat roof extension, including the additional space. And he actually said that he would like to keep the lean-to element of it, so that you could read how it had developed over the years. So effectively, you've got the lean-to, and then the additional space would be a flat roof, partly because, partly because of aesthetic, but also partly, as you can see, there's a window at the first floor, and there's a neighbour quite close courtyard. So he needed to keep the overall height as low as possible, hence the flat roof. But he wanted to keep the pitch roof, which I think is perfectly reasonable. So you can see then effectively that there is 3 periods of developments. There's the original house, there's the lean-to, but actually there was an original scullery, I think, there, but that's been rebuilt back in possibly the 90s. Not especially well, but that was rebuilt. But you can read that development in the 90s, and then now the 21st century development, if assuming this goes ahead. And so part of that is what we want to do is respect the local vernacular, if you like. So essentially what is a boundary wall at the moment will become an external wall. So that will be built with a stone facing. So that kind of reflects the other buildings around. The gable that you can see the current lean-to will stay as a rendered wall, because that's what it is at the moment. And then the bit which is distinctly new will be a timber clad, which is just effectively facing the garden. And there is actually an access path for neighbours between their yard and the garden, but it's effectively facing the garden. And with modern fenestration, with a kind of bifold doors, and a modern aluminium windows, if I remember rightly. I think that kind of covers it. Oh, there's a bit of internal reconfiguration as well, because again, internally, the house doesn't really work that well for the family. So they wanted to open up a bit more space so they can have a shower room downstairs, a bit more, because they've got, a largish family. And then another kind of space for washing machine, kind of a utility type space, I suppose, and storage. And that's very much driven by their needs, really, rather than anything else, because the current configuration doesn't really work for them. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Hopefully,
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
That garden belongs to them.
Sorry?
The garden belongs to them.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
But there's a little separation path. That's what I'm seeing. I see it. I'm looking at Google Earth, so I can see it. I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, so the
But-
garden's beyond the park. Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like you're just going to go. The building is just going to cover the existing bit of cement, really, at the back of the house. That sort of shape, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so have we had any complaints from neighbors? That's the only thing, because there's one neighbor who's very close.
There haven't been any comments from the neighbours. We did receive comments from the Civic Society, and their objection was the harm to the historic fabric even, that part of the existing low boundary wall to be demolished looks original to the house, so should not be demolished until this has been checked. The conversion of a ground floor window to a door will also result in the loss of historic fabric. Say the harm to the appearance and character of the listed building and conservation area. The wood cladding at the rear is inappropriate. Rubble stone or at least plain render would be a better match. The pyramid roof light partially obscures the first floor window. The combination of the retained pitch to the rear extension and the flat roof element with deep fascia to the new extension is unsympathetic. We appreciate that it's difficult to tell from the elevations, but it does appear to be rather incoherent. And they're saying there's harm to the historic plan form. Proposed layout loses all sense of internal logic by placing a shower room between the room at the north and the kitchen to its rear, although the latter has been rebuilt. These two spaces originally formed a single dwelling. It makes for a very awkward circulation, which may suit the present occupants, but doesn't seem an appropriate long-term solution for a listed building. And their second objection is about neighbour amenity. They don't expand on that, just to say about neighbour amenity. So there have not been any objections from the neighbours, but that's the comments of the Civic Society.
Sorry, Rich, I was reading that.
So presumably, all of these changes would have to go through the conservation officers. Okay, anyway. So whatever you draw and whatever the plans are, it would be down to Jane Baldy or somebody like that, Mendip, who would have the final say. So those sort of issues can be ironed out, presumably, and also presumably they follow building regs, standards, and all the rest of it. So just.
Sorry, John, after you, please.
The houses, I understand those, I know those houses, and they can be small and cramped if you got kids in there and you're trying to live. So I can't actually see any objection from the design. So all these houses evolve, and the fact that they try to preserve as much of the old fabric, but there's a lot of really ancient old crappy walls around that could be a bit better.
Yeah, I think just to expand on what you said, John, I get the need to maintain the ancient fabric, but you've already had two houses knocked into one anyway. So that ancient fabric is it's already been altered and amended, isn't it? So I don't really see, certainly internally, any issue with carrying on with those amendments and bringing those amendments up to the 21st century by shower rooms and stuff like that. And I get the use of materials. I can see where the owner's coming from as well. He wants to show the progression of the building throughout its history, and the use of timber cladding does that quite well, doesn't it? Quite frankly, if you were to render it, and then you're trying to blend in with the existing to a certain extent. So I understand where the Civic Society is coming from, but I can also fully understand where the owner's coming from with his desires as well. It's their house. That's my view at the end of the day, and what they want to within realms.
Yeah, what you're saying is quite correct. I mean, I live around the corner. As Paul mentioned, in 1980, they put a stop to the clear felling of Trinity, recognizing what an important heritage asset it was for the town and the area. However, that didn't mean that the houses were fit for habitation. They were being pulled down because they were slums. I wasn't allowed to go and play there when I was a kid because it was deemed to be not a nice place to be. I now live around the corner. I choose to live in a listed building with the expenses that goes with that and the costs that and responsibilities you have in a heritage asset. But these houses have to develop to accommodate modern needs. I mean, I know how ecologically aware you are, so they'll be making this house a lot more efficient, a lot more suitable for the needs of a modern family and a growing family. I know Adam and the family. And so I think this committee has a responsibility as pointed out by the Civic Society, to maintain our heritage asset, but we must take that hand in hand with making places for people to live. Otherwise, we'll end up living in a museum, we'll end up with houses that aren't fit for occupation again. So I'm happy to support this application.
Lizzie, I think you just about to see you.
Yeah, hello, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me as well. Jane, give me a nod.
Loud and clear.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. So yeah, I'm agreeing with a few things in terms of I really like the distinctiveness of it and how it separates out from the original building, original mashup building, because often we do talk in these meetings about how people are trying to make things that look very similar to the original, and that's not what we should be doing. We should be looking for things which actually redefine the original, say this is the old thing and this is something that's different and new and modern. So I really like that, I like the new elements of it. I think we have to allow that 21st century plumbing is permitted in the 21st century, and that you know, bathrooms are now things that are inside our buildings, and that people want the utility of having a shower somewhere in their building. So I have no problem with that. I'd be interested to know from Paul, as the architect, the designer, about the sustainability features that were mentioned a moment ago. Mark mentioned them, I think, about what the decisions are you made about materials and fabric and things like that to minimise the environmental impact of the project.
In kind of in common with similar kind of extensions, small developments, that those decisions aren't set in stone at the moment because it's at planning stage. They'll come at building reg stage. However, as Mark rightly says, I will be pushing for higher than building regs standards on all of it. So part of it will involve digging up the current floor in the existing kitchen, to put insulation in the floor. I think they're probably going to go for underfloor heating, if I remember rightly. But again, you know, that's a decision that hasn't been set in stone yet. I think I know that they've spoken to the potential builder, and he's suggesting that they could retain much of the existing kitchen structure, at least the gable wall. And I'm saying, well, okay, yeah, that's fair enough, but you're going to have to insulate it if you do that. And it actually might be better to knock it down and build a proper insulated wall. That's a conversation still to be had, but certainly I'll be pushing for, and the roof, particularly on that kitchen, the pitch kitchen, definitely needs upgrading. So, you know, again, that will be a lot more insulation, etc. in there. So, yeah, it'll be good, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lizzie. Any other questions, comments?
Just me, I'm not sure, Paul. I'll amend it back doing site visits again. Yeah. So
they've been ready.
yeah. So the conservation officer will have the benefit of having been in the building, looked at it, can see very clearly for herself whether or not she believes there's any impact to the historic fabric of the building. Yeah. Okay.
Where are we then, Jane?
Well, it sounds very much to me like that we don't have any objections,
No.
subject to the conservation officer's comments on this one.
Yeah. Everyone agree with that? Yeah. Someone propose that, please. Thank you, John. Thank you, Rich. All those in favour? Sorry, Paul, you can't vote.
And that's a majority.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, that takes us on to the next application I've highlighted for discussion, which is number 782 on our list, which is 73 Windsor Crescent, Frome. The reason for discussing this one is based on the objections that have been submitted by the neighbours. If you just bear with me while I share my screen. Oh, knew that would happen. Okay, so this is, as I said, 73 Windsor Crescent. It's for a rear first floor extension. The comments from the neighbours who live at this property here is that this element of the extension will block their light. And what they have actually demonstrated as part of their objection Sorry if that is a bit small. You may have heard of the 45-degree rule, which essentially is taken from the extension at an angle of 45 degrees. And you can see in this instance that it actually does cut through a window here. And they've demonstrated that on the elevation. So what that is showing you is that there will be a significant loss of light and amenity to their property because of the depth of the extension, which I think you can see more clearly here. And yeah, I mean that they've demonstrated it. They are right. It will impact on their amenity.
Technical clarification, the 45-degree rule, I thought no one had a right to light. We explained that in another one.
It's not necessarily about a right to light or the right to view, but it's about the impact on the enjoyment and amenity of their property. And that the 45-degree rule is set out in planning guidance as being a sort of an indicator of when that does impact on people's amenity. Yeah.
So is there some way that they could overcome that, do you think?
So what they have suggested is that if the applicant wants to consider extending behind or to the front of the recent side extension, or reducing the depth of that extension, then that would remove their objection, and it would also because the 45-degree rule wouldn't kick in. So it's not they're not objecting to the fact that they want to extend. It's just the depth of that extension and the impact that it will have on them. And I think they've shown that quite clearly, that it will impact on them.
I didn't object when I looked at the plans, but then because there's plenty of garden space.
Yeah.
But now I have this information.
Exactly.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. It wasn't immediately obvious looking at the plans without being at site that actually the depth of that extension would have such an impact.
You can't see it from the road either,
No.
can you? No, so.
That's a location plan. I don't know whether there was one. Just bear with me a second. If I talk amongst yourselves, I'll see if I can find it.
So what we'd have to do is object on the basis that they need to go back and sort out the.
I think, yeah, I think so. I mean, it seems as though the objective neighbour has actually come up with a reasonable solution.
Yeah,
reading their comments, so they're not objecting full stop. What they're basically saying is, if you amend the plans a bit, then it can all work. So I think that's probably the basis. To me, that's the basis of what we need to.
That completely. I never saw it.
Yeah. Well, I drove around there as well, and a bit from you can't actually. Most of those houses have been extended at one point or another, and it's not that easy to.
Does the Civic Society objection mirror what this other objector has said?
Have you got that handy when I try?
They objected to this.
I shall read it out. The neighbour to the use number 72 will be seriously disadvantaged by the first floor extension and will lose a significant amount of natural light to the ground floor rear windows. This is excessive and intrusive development beyond most of the extensions along the line of other houses, especially at first floor level. Note also that the proposed site elevation does not show the side window shown on the first floor plan of the new small bedroom.
I don't know why.
So they picked it up.
Let me share my screen. Not for that element, but that's the plan.
It doesn't really, can't see where the neighbour is.
No, you can't.
No.
You can't pick it out.
No, that's probably why we didn't.
No.
Has anyone else got any comments?
I think if you look down the road on Google Earth again, you'll see that it's further than anything else along that whole stretch, so it sticks out.
Right.
More. There's lots of extensions, but
Yeah, exactly. Oh, lots of extensions. Yeah.
Okay, so do we want to object because we feel that the extension will have an adverse impact on the amenity of the neighbours?
We agree with the Civic
Yeah.
Society, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Done
Done that very detailed objection.
Mhm. Okay, so should we vote on that?
Yeah, so we happy
Yeah.
to go along with that? Thanks, Rich. Thank you, Mark.
That's unanimous, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, so I haven't specifically highlighted any other applications for discussion, unless there are any that you particularly want to raise.
I mean, is it worth mentioning the retreat? Because I mean, I don't want to go on at length.
Okay, yeah, so this is,
Been involved in lots of negotiations with that, but I think this is just a procedural thing, isn't it? It's an environmental management plan while
is,
construction happens, and in a sense, it's probably not for us to comment. It would be for the environment department that mend it to make comments, detailed comments.
so just for clarification, this is number 783 on our list. It's land adjacent to the retreat Froome, and the description is application for approval of details reserved by condition 12, which is the construction environmental management plan for the previously approved application. And yes, you're absolutely right, Rich. Essentially, it is a document that sets out how construction will be dealt with. So what the hours between which they will work, noise levels, controlling dust levels, and actually it would need the expertise of the environmental protection officer to look at those noise levels and say whether or not what they're proposing is fair in terms of the impacts that it might have on the neighbouring properties.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
Any others?
Just number 790. When I looked, there were no supporting documents.
790, that is because, oh, no, it's not the one I thought it was.
It was the last one on the list, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So it's number 790, 81A Keyford, and it's an application for approval of details reserved by condition for the provision and storage of recycling and waste containers. I suspect it's just a plan that shows where they will go.
Right. Okay.
If I'll check whether it's been uploaded yet.
There's nothing there. That was...
To be honest, we don't normally get consulted on applications for approval of details. I think because they were on the list and it was done slightly differently this time in my absence, they've been put on, so we wouldn't necessarily be asked to comment on them. It's like the first one, it's approval of samples, but obviously we can't see the samples. So yeah. So it may not, shouldn't possibly have been on our list anyway, but yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on any other application?
Can't be the end of it, can it?
We're used to 2 hours, aren't we? We've done 29 minutes so far.
I'll go through them all if you like.
Rather not.
Yeah. If not, then are we happy to return no objection on the remaining applications on the list?
Yes. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, John.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Okay, item number 7 on the agenda. The date of the next meeting is 10th of March 2022. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you very much for. I'm sorry, it was a. You should have come along previously. You'd have needed a sleeping bag. We were here for 2.5 hours. But please come along on the 10th of March. It'll probably be there's at least a couple of interesting ones on the 10th of March. Or Town Matters on Wednesday. Yeah.
I think we're okay to stop now.
Somebody used to, was it Baines who used to go through this?
No.